Hi, I'm your host Vasco Duarte. Welcome to the Scrum Master Toolbox podcast, where we share tips and tricks from Scrum Masters around the world. Every day, we bring you inspiring answers to important questions that all Scrum Masters face day after day. Welcome everybody. Today is Tuesday, Team Tuesday, here on the Scrum Master Toolbox podcast, and we have with us David Wallace. Hi David, welcome back.
Hey, happy to be here.
Absolutely. Pleasure to have you, because today we talk about teams. But before we dive into that, let's talk about a book, potentially the book that most inspired you as a Scrum Master, David. Which book was that?
Absolutely. So the book that most inspired me is actually the very first Agile book that I read. It was given to me by someone who ended up becoming one of my mentors in this space, and it's called The Human Side of Agile by Gil Broza. It's a fantastic book in terms of helping you think about people, which when you think about the software development process and the whole product development cycle, a lot of people get caught up in the rules and the process and all the things that need to happen. And we forget the most important factor is the people involved and how every single team that you work with is going to be different because the people are different. And even changing out one person on a team can completely change the team dynamics. And this book really highlights that. It helps you figure out how to dive into that and embrace the differences that happen on the human side and how to apply the learnings from that to help that team grow and become effective. And the way the book is laid out, it's actually a great reference book as you encounter difficult situations throughout your career, to be able to go back and just flip it open, and the chapter titles kind of help you see, okay, this chapter would probably apply to my situation. And you can read through and get some tips from him on how to approach that situation in a human way.
Absolutely. I definitely put the link on the show notes for all of you to go and check it out. And also mention that today's Tuesday. And on Tuesdays, we usually introduce a book. It's called Shift from Product to People, written by Pete Oliver Kruger and Michael Doherty. And that book is exactly emphasizing the importance to start focusing on people, right? We used to have this we had the waterfall to agile phase, then we have this project to product phase, and now we have the third wave, which is this from product to people phase, and definitely a lot of insights, I'm sure, in that book as well. So be sure to check those out. David, today's Tuesday, and we talk about people. Hey, what a coincidence. People as teams, of course, since in Agile software development, we rarely work alone. We very often work with other people. And we want to focus on what are some of the patterns or behaviors that make it hard to work with people, the patterns or behaviors that end up destroying teams. So walk us through a story of a team. Tell us a little bit of how that pattern or behavior developed over time, like even the slow, small signs or symptoms that you were starting to see at the beginning. Like, walk us through the whole process.
Absolutely. So yeah, there was a team I worked with, and it was an interesting dynamic. The team really cared about the product they were working on. They really wanted it to be stable. They wanted it to be useful for the customer, all of these things, but they started doing little things that I was just didn't understand. There was one guy on the team that he was obsessed with the code itself, and they had inherited the code base from a company that had been acquired. And every time he picked up a story to work on, he would start refactoring the code around it. And it was stuff that's outside of the scope of the story. So we would talk to him about that, how you need to make sure that you're not adding complexity to the story by doing all of this refactoring necessarily. And but he just kept going with it. And the team themselves actually pushed back against me, saying, oh, well, he's making the code more stable, he's making it better. But then it went from it being him taking a story that should have taken a couple of days to finish, that's taking a full week to finish, to where he would pick up a story and just disappear into a little hole. and come out like 2 weeks later and had a pull request that he submitted that was hundreds of lines of code long.
Way back when we used to call those CVS bombs, because
Yes.
CVS was the version control of the time.
Yeah, absolutely. And he would do that, and the team would get so frustrated with him. And so I would talk to him and be like, hey, y'all kind of built this culture here because you've been encouraging him to fix the code as he goes along. And so we were trying to work through that, and get them focused back. And then I found out there was another layer of what was going on. And it was that the manager was actually kind of micromanaging them. And in his one-on-ones with them, he was basing his view of how well they were doing on how many lines of code they had committed. And some of those kind of anti-patterns that you see where managers start measuring based off of certain things that don't have anything to do with you writing quality code and actually stable code and those things. And yeah, the between the managers micromanaging and measuring them on some of these wrong things, and the team having pushed back against the typical agile process by encouraging this guy to go down the refactoring rabbit hole, they just really sabotaged themselves.
Yeah, absolutely. There's an interesting aspect that I think is worth highlighting for us as Scrum Masters, which is this concept of having a second layer of things that is going on. And very often, because that's what we normally do, we focus on what's happening inside the team, right? And most of the times that's fine, because the team is, maybe they are working well together, or at least they're working heavily together. They have little influence from the outside. But as you said, as you illustrated in this example, sometimes the influence from the outside is rather big and has a cascading effect, right? Like it just grows over time. And in this case, it caused somebody to go off into a rabbit hole, but it could have caused conflict. It could have caused a very common anti-pattern, which is people changing lines of code for the sake of changing them,
Yep.
because that's how you get more lines of code changed, right? And it highlights this aspect for me, in the Scrum Master role, that we always need to be looking beyond what's being discussed, beyond what's in front of us, because we are working with systems. Organizations and teams are systems. They interact with each other, and if we don't know what are the external stimulus that is coming in, then we can't act on that. We can't, change our approach or ask for advice or just simply ask questions from the team about that.
Absolutely. And yeah, it took a lot of digging for me to even be able to uncover what was going on that second layer. But once it did, then I was able to sit down and kind of coach that manager one-on-one on like, hey, here's some behaviors that you're driving on the team. Is that what you're intending? He was like, no, that's absolutely not what I'm intending. Cool. Then let's look at it a different way. Let's think about how you can get the results you want without driving these anti-patterns that we don't.
And without driving these anti-patterns is then a conversation that we can have together with that person. Because the idea is that we are not there to take away the responsibility. We are there to ask the questions, right? I think that's a very important kind of process that you went through. Like, this is happening. Did you know? Oh, no, that's not what I want. Okay, great. So how can we get what you want in a way that doesn't cause this to happen?
Absolutely. And we even together went to the team and said, okay, we recognize that we've been doing things a little bit wrong here. Like, here are the things that we want to see happen. And we started talking about delivering value regularly, being able to do releases at certain times, those kind of things. And we were like, what changes do we need to make that happen? And actually got the team bought into the discussion and being able to set up a new system that everybody agreed on to drive those practices and to have those common goals. And I credit this manager for having the open mind to be willing to, one, involve the team and get their buy-in into this, and two, for him to be able to change his own behaviors and patterns, to be able to stop measuring those those metrics that were causing the problems, and instead shifting his mindset to a way to deliver it in a more agile way that actually got value to the customers faster.
Absolutely. A great story. Thank you for sharing that, David.
Absolutely.
Tuesday is Team Day here on the Scrum Master Toolbox podcast. But tomorrow we talk about something that goes beyond the work we do with the teams. We will talk about how to lead change and what our guests have learned from leading and participating in change programs during their career. See you tomorrow.
We really hope you liked our show. And if you did, why not rate this podcast on Stitcher or iTunes? Share this podcast and let other Scrum Masters know about this valuable resource for their work. Remember that sharing is caring.